In the last video, we learned that receiving a message over a channel is a blocking operation. We're now going to refactor this block of print line statements right here into something a little bit more reasonable. So in reality, we're never going to really want to see a bunch of lined up receiving message calls like this right here. So we're going to replace all this with a simple for loop instead. So I'm going to delete this, and instead we're going to write a for loop that's going to call that format.println function and receive a value over our channel a number of times equal to the number of strings that we have in our slice right here. So let's get to it. Now, we've never written a for loop before that did not use the range helper. And in this case, I don't want to use the range helper. I want to just iterate from 0 up to 1 minus the number of strings that are inside the slice. So to do a for loop that counts up through some integers, we're going to use a very familiar syntax that you're probably used to seeing with, say, JavaScript or Java or C++. Basically, it's a C-inspired for loop. So we'll say for I starting off at 0, and then counting up to I less than length of links, and then we'll increment by 1 every single time. Okay, so basically start off at 0, count up to 1 minus the length of links right here, and then we'll say that for every iteration through this loop, we'll format.println and receive a value from our channel C, like so. Now, before we run this code, I want you to kind of visualize what's happening with this for loop right here. The first time that the for loop is executed, we're going to hit this println statement right here. Now, the println, or specifically receiving a value out of the channel, is going to actually block the for loop from continuing on. So as soon as we receive a message through the channel, this entire line of code right here will actually finally execute, and then we'll continue on to the next iteration through the for loop. So the whole loop is not executed instantaneously or like all at once. We are still waiting for a message to come through the channel before we continue on to the next iteration of the loop. So let's save this file and then test this out at the command line. Okay, so now we are just listening for a number of messages equal to 1, or the number of elements inside the slice minus 1. And so we essentially wait for 5 messages to come through, then there is no other code to be executed inside of our main routine, and our program exits entirely. Now, this might seem like a kind of hackish approach right here to just look at the length of links, but honestly, a lot of stuff that you're going to see in Go sometimes feels a little bit hackish. But in truth, I wouldn't really call this hackish. I would call this just simple and straightforward to understand. You can look at this and it doesn't really use any fancy helpers. All you really have to understand is that a value coming through C is a blocking call. And as long as you understand that, then you're probably going to figure out very quickly that, hey, we're just putting this thing together to wait for every Go routine to emit one message, and then we'll exit from this program entirely. Okay, so there's still a lot of other ways of interacting with a channel. So let's take a break. We're going to come back in the next section, and we're going to add on another requirement or two to our program, and we'll just see how we can write that and put all that stuff together. So quick break, and we'll continue exploring channels in the next section.